So
Yeah.
it shouldn't take too long. I just have a couple questions for
Sure.
you.
Any questions you
The,
have?
the first one is, why are you calling for a recall right now?
So it's been a few months now. The big problem was the shutting down of the economy
Mm-hmm.
is more in line with tyranny than it is the narrative that he's doing what's best for the Nevadan people, because the goal is to quarantine sick people and allow the free Nevadan people to maintain their freedoms. So that was the initial narrative, and it has developed and gotten deeper the further that I've researched more about Sisolak and his history, and also his connections, as well as the symbolism he produces, which includes that of it seems like he's more of a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party, that the Chinese Communist Party actually has control over globalist organizations like the CDC and the WHO, who are issuing mandates on the Chinese Communist Party's behalf, in a indirect form of economic warfare. If Sisolak is actually a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party and he follows the WHO, that means he is committing subversion and economic warfare against the Nevadan people by following these orders.
And what's your evidence for Sisolak having connections to the Chinese Communist Party?
The newly married wife post-election is Chinese, but the symbology around it involves the state of the state address, in which she wears all red with yellow buttons, symbolic of the Chinese flag, and walks in first into the state of the state address ahead of him. So it's more of a sign that she, by proxy, the Chinese Communist Party, is in charge of Sisolak and the state of Nevada. By this means, he's also pictured and attends many Chinese events. If you look up images onto Google, you will see that he has a lot of interactions, and he's made frequent travels to China.
Sorry. And then my next question here is, do you have any general plans as to how you're going to get the required number of signatures for the petition?
Yeah, so the Constitution, Article 2, Section 9, requires 1/4 of the total voter turnout in that election to sign a petition in order to have a recall, which would have two different consequences. For the lower candidates, for the smaller, like the district candidates, or maybe the county candidates, there would be the option to resign, in which county commissioners would then pick a replacement of that party. But the governor would actually lead to a special election in which we'd get to vote for a new governor. And we are there's also another restriction by the Nevada Revised Statutes, the NRS, which is not explicitly given any constitutional authority in the Constitution, in the state Constitution, but the Secretary of State is still following it, as they regard it as law equal to the Constitution. And that actually places a very strict timeline on a very specific section of this recall process, which is gathering the physical signatures. Because in the Constitution, the state Constitution, it requires inked signatures. So pen, signing your name on the petition. And the Nevada Revised Statutes limits that period to 90 days. And so there's a process in which you need to formalize your petition with the Secretary of State. And then the Secretary of State will limit you to 90 days in order to collect the 1/4 or however many signatures you can get. But the minimum you need in order to succeed is 1/4 of the total voter turnout. And in
And you haven't,
2018,
oh, go ahead. You
2018
haven't,
general election was about 900,000. So divide that by 4, you get about 200 and you get exactly 243,995. So our process in order to succeed in that very limited timeline is to hold off from actually formalizing with the Secretary of State until we have an online, like a spreadsheet list of 244,000 eligible, verified Nevadan voters. So the way in which we conduct this process is people who sign up online, or we call people and we sign them up into our preparational list. And then we do a check on the voter databases with the government to see if they're eligible and how many people in the household are eligible. And that number we have created into a chart, a growth chart. And once that number surpasses 244,000, we will feel confident that we can succeed in that 90-day period because we know exactly who is ready, willing, and able to sign this petition, so that when we formalize it, we just get, contact them and we talk to them directly. That's how we would succeed. That's how we will succeed, actually.
that was one of my questions because you hadn't formalized your petition yet, but I know that you've been collecting signatures.
It would be shooting yourself in the foot to formalize your petition without having that list. And that's why Fight for Nevada failed. And that's why I'm a bit concerned about the mutiny group, Battle Born Patriots, because they actually filed with the Secretary of State before they announced their mutiny away from Fight for Nevada. And that's one of the big problems. 90 days, if you don't know who you need to talk to, you're hoping and praying that the media will distribute the recall information, or maybe the Secretary of State will send text messages or help, or you get enough volunteers to reach the awareness necessary. It's a gamble. And if you fail, it's disheartening, and it's not necessarily because there wasn't enough people who wanted to recall Sisolak. It may likely be more because 250,000 people eligible signing this petition is quite an effort, and you don't want to jump the gun, especially if the Secretary of State is going to hold a leash around you once you formalize, limiting you to a 90-day period.
And my next question is, how many signatures do you guys have, or when do you think that you would come out with to formalize your petition?
How many do we have? When do you think we would start? So
Yeah.
As far as physical signatures, none. We're not getting those signatures. You can't get the signatures
not
until
physical
after the
signatures. I
formalization
meant
process.
in terms of the numbers that you've been collecting.
The list that we have, and I'll send you after this interview, I'll send you an email of the latest image, because every day I'm always adding people, like the people who sign up. There's quite a process that goes through, seeing what assembly district they live in, seeing what precinct they live in, seeing what kind of volunteer effort they would like to give, whether it's knocking on their neighbors' doors or giving phone calls to the people in the neighborhood or financially contributing to send postcards. But we are closing in on 1,000 people who are in our list. And just to reference, the grand total unchecked, but the grand total that Fight for Nevada had when their petition failed in May was 33,000.
And do you have any timeline for when you think that you'll go forward with formalizing it, or you're just kind of waiting until you see the numbers in your data?
Yeah, well, we follow the data. So once we get the 245,000, I expect this election cycle is going to have a lot of major volatility in terms of especially the duopoly, the political establishment, the Republicans and Democrats. It looks like Trump is on par to really hit a home run in the election. And that is going to cause a lot of people just to get involved in politics, but also start looking at some of the corruption that's been taking place, especially here in Nevada. And so I have a hopes that we will really reach our goal sometime around Christmas.
If your effort failed, like if say you were to formalize,
if we got 240, 260, however many, and then we rolled out the petitions and we were not able to get those signatures either because we screwed up somewhere or because we just weren't able to get the papers out to everyone and we failed.
Would you then try and, get together with other groups? Why haven't you decided to work with other groups on this?
Well, so the main group, Fight for Nevada, I created a video on this. I hope you share it. And I did share it with you already, is showing how there's a likely possibility that Governor Steve Sisolak is actually influencing the recall campaign against Sisolak. If you could imagine a corrupt governor who would want to maintain the moat, maybe there was crimes committed, maybe there was voter fraud, then your only risk in getting removed, other than an impeachment, if you controlled the legislature, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But the people you'd always have to be worried about, in which there's that recall right in our Constitution. So if you wanted to just maintain your power at the expense of the people, you would create a proxy leadership in the aggressive, dominant, divisive, destructive recall group that would try and maintain its dominance, but fail. And so essentially you'd corral Nevadan patriots into the recall group that looks the most official, only to sabotage its efforts in actually succeeding. And that's
so are you kind of saying then that Sisolak has, in your perspective, Sisolak has a connection to Fight for Nevada, and that's why Fight for Nevada hasn't been successful?
Yes.
And then to kind of follow up on that, would you try and band together? Because Fight for Nevada isn't the only group that's been having, that's rolling out the recall petition, right? We've seen Save Nevada, a couple others have recently filed.
I would like to, actually, if you have research on all of them, I would love to see the list. I'm really just familiar with Fight for Nevada, and then the mutiny that formed out of Fight for Nevada, which is Battle Born Patriots. And I actually want to show you, as far as joining, the history is, I've been following this since March, April, because I actually started my recall efforts in April. I actually have the first document, like inbound data of people signing up through the Mindy Robinson, who was the primary candidate for a House District number 3. And she was talking about Sisolak, and I actually started sharing my sign up link in her tweets. And that's where I got like about 100 people for the first couple of days before I really started developing the data infrastructure and a whole lot of other things. But right here I have a Facebook chat by a man named, I don't know if you could see it very well, but it's
a little fuzzy.
His name is Ray Kemple. I guess I'll just read it to you. And we just had a quick conversation, but his last message was, I'm speaking on behalf of BBP, which is Battle Born Patriots. We would like you to come aboard. We have 800 volunteers for Clark County ready for mobilization. I saw you say you've been compiling a voter list. We have the means to get those people a petition in hand. And that was sent after 142. So like literally right before we had this conversation.
And would you consider joining or sharing your information with them?
I'd consider joining, of course. We'd need to really develop. I feel like I have the right system in place, and if Battle Born Patriots did a good job in dividing the moral actors within their group. So if you could imagine, Fight for Nevada is a big recall group. The people at the very top of that group would not be, it would be for Sisolak and be immoral actors. But then this mutiny is an interesting perspective. And the only question I have about it is, are there still bad actors who have transitioned into leadership positions through the mutiny? Or, as they claim, was it just good people in county leadership positions who realized that there's something wrong with the top of the leadership. So they all, got smart and got out, making maybe a few, from my perspective, just a few small mistakes along the way, which, is fine. One could expect that to happen. But essentially I have the systems, I have the data. I've downloaded all the Clark County voter databases. I've got this system in which we can create really momentous acceleration. And it looks like they have a lot of people. And if they have great intentions and are willing to bring me into that team so that we can merge the best of both worlds, we could definitely succeed. That being said, I still think that they made a mistake by formalizing with the Secretary of State already. And so I wouldn't want to get too invested right now, personally, because I'm also running a political campaign for state assembly. I'm running as a nonpartisan in my legislative district. So the two kind of go hand in hand. The recalling of Sisolak is very, very popular amongst the Republicans, and that doubles over, the people in my district who are signing up to recall, which is the majority in my list. It's also because I need to prove that I lean right and I stand with Trump for the Republican viewership.
So so for you then, is it a matter of just communicating with this other, with the other groups and assessing kind of where you're going to go forward, but you don't have a definitive, we will join, we won't, but we'll see where things are?
Say that again.
I'm repeating back to you just to make sure I understand what you're saying,
okay,
which is that you have all this data, you have all the information, you have the names. You're willing to talk with the individual that you showed me, right? The message, but you're not guaranteeing that you're going to, share your resources with them until you look at it more closely.
Well, yeah. And really, right. It's not just, see, that's one side of it. Are you going to share all your resources with them? But it goes two ways. If we're going to merge, I will share my resources with you as you share your resources with me, and we are going to unite. So, I've got data, I've got, the system. I just need, data entry specialists. I need call volunteers who will, spend some time making phone calls and adding information to forms. They would essentially be adopting my digital form process, but it's kind of conflicting because since they already signed up with the Secretary of State, they need the physical signatures as well. So it would be kind of a scramble. And that's the assessment that I got as well, was that there's a scramble that's going on to try and get ahead of all of this or catch up, or, but so in my understanding, scrambling and rushing is not the way to do it right. I think, if I join, it's going to be probably a secondary role and maybe a mentorship to see where they can get and prepare for the worst case scenario, which is that they fail as well. And that way, if they are truly dedicated and they realize that they may have made a mistake in this worst case scenario, which is still, on the moral side of things, then what we would do is we'd gather all of this data and we'd prepare it in a digital format so that when they fail, we get up and we go again, and we're ready. I mean, their petition should end around Christmas time, or 11, maybe the end of November, I think. So it's just a matter of getting the ducks in a row. And
well, I think those are my main
team, so.
questions. Do you have anything else that you think I should know? I just kind of always ask that at the end of an interview.
Oh, saboteurs is definitely a big part of it. There's a lot of evidence of saboteurs in Nevada, and I actually refrained from sharing a video with you because I didn't want to overload you with a bunch of videos right before our meeting, but I could send you another video as well, which is there are people who are joining my Facebook group with an intention of, coming in with good intentions at the beginning. and then crushing the morale or gaslighting the audience once they get in there. And so it's really an uphill battle, especially with people who probably just seem angry or angsty and aggressive and mistrustful of someone they never met. But it also kind of doubles as marching orders. The stormtroopers are going in to try and wreak havoc so they can maintain the sabotaged momentum and overwhelm leaders who are honestly trying to exercise constitutional rights, which require like a popular group voice. So I'll share that other video with you. I think her name is Christy Scott, who's is the one that the video is about, and she owns Battle Born Ammo in Carson City. But the big concern is that she, in her LinkedIn profile, has experience as a investigator, and she's not investigating Fight for Nevada whatsoever. And so Battle Born Patriots has called out Fight for Nevada, but they haven't done a very good job explaining exactly what the corruption was, because their claims are actually completely different than mine. They didn't say, Sisolak is a part of this. They said there was someone they never mentioned who has like a felony for forgery, but they didn't. And then there's also no explanation as to where the finances are going. And they never really dig into it as far as like screen shares and all of this. But the other thing I'd like to bring up is Fight for Nevada had two presidents. The first one in Elko, the second one is in Lake Las Vegas. And I live in Lake Las Vegas. I find it odd that their new management, their new president, just so happens to be 5-minute drive from where I live. And in the same assembly district. I mean, really close. And the imagery, I guess I'll share another video with you as well about this Rodolfo Clay, CLAI, who seems to be, just as far as the look and the presentation, seems to be a part of the mafia. Like, he just looks like a casino mobster, as well as a part of the satanic religion, or just promoting, let's say, a conflict of religion where there seems to be Christian values textually, but then there's satanic symbolism visually.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So feel free to send me any videos. And then if you could also send me the numbers that you have, just because I'm curious for how many
The growth
people
chart.
Your growth chart. That would be amazing. All
Okay.
right. Well, I think those are all my questions. Thank you so much for making time to speak with me today. And
Sure.
reach out if anything else comes up. So.
All right, Tabitha. Thank you so much.
All right. No problem.